Outstanding. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jason Gamble. I'm the current president for the Rossi Lambda chapter, that is the Bronx Alphas. Alpha Phi Incorporated, founded in 1906. We are the oldest, the coldest, and the boldest historically Black fraternity. Today, the pleasure of presenting a great program for you with two amazing speakers. Brother Anthony Browder, who is a brother of our fraternity and an amazing man all around. I had the pleasure of going to Kemet with him some years back. For those of you who do not know him, you are in for a treat. And Dr. James Small, another one of our amazing elders. The topic for today is about why Kemet matters, but even more importantly, is paying homage to two amazing brothers who, if you're not familiar with their work, I think you should Google them. I think you should go to YouTube. You should find out as much as possible and definitely pick up their books and works. They'll talk about that a little bit more. At this point, I also want to pay homage to three amazing elders that we did not get the opportunity to share with. Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, Dr. Asa Hilliard, and Dr. Neely Fuller Jr. It is due to the passing of these great elders who are now ancestors that I decided to start doing programs like this, because we need to start to hear words from master teachers and give them their flowers while they're around. Every generation should know about these men. They should understand why their work matters and why their contributions matter. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to Brother Anthony Browder. Brother Browder.
Well, thank you so much, Brother Jason, for heeding the call, right? And creating this opportunity for me to have this conversation with you all and my dear brother, Brother Small, who I've had the pleasure of knowing for almost 40 years, and someone that I would put my life on the line for. You know, he's one of those rare persons that I have learned from, that I view as closer than family, and I've come to understand him as being part of what one of our proudest jegnas, John Henry Clark, referred to as the people who do this work are part of a priesthood. They're part of a tradition that stretches back hundreds of years, thousands of years, to the continent of Africa, where there were men and women who were responsible for being the light bearers. They were responsible for being the retainers of historical and cultural knowledge, to preserve that information and to ensure that it was passed down from mouth to ear, from generation to generation. So I've been blessed to have traveled to Africa with James Small and his partner in mental liberation, Lynn Jeffries and Rosalind Jeffries, and they've helped to direct my growth. So everything that I've done throughout my career, I can attribute to people like James Small, people like Dr. Welsing and Dr. Hilliard and Dr. Fuller, who you also referenced at the top of this program. So I've been traveling to Egypt for a number of years, doing study tours to Egypt, doing excavations in Egypt, writing books about our history and culture. And I'm at the point in my life where I'm ready to shift, shifting primarily because I now, at the age of 74, I have a greater understanding of what I thought I knew. You know, the knowledge that I've been accumulating over the past 4.5 decades is now becoming crystal clear to me. So the opportunity that we have this afternoon to chop it up with Brother James Small is going to be a blessing to me and everyone else who is in attendance. So thank you all for this opportunity. Appreciate you.
Professor Small, if you don't mind, can you introduce yourself for the crowd here?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I was just taking a second. Tony placed me so high in the cosmos, I had to get back down to this chair and then try to hold on. But I'm Professor James Small. I'm a product of Malcolm X, OAAU, former minister of the Muslim Mosque Inc., former Haji of the Muslim Mosque Inc., former bodyguard of Malcolm X's sister, former professor at City College University, studied under Dr. Len Jeffries, Dr. Clark, Dr. Ben, and under my younger brother, Dr. Anthony Browder. I mean, he raises me up, but Anthony is the one that's been opening after Dr. Ben. I mean, and Dr. Ben was like uncle, father, friend, buddy of his bodyguard and other things. And so you learn things just being there. But after Dr. Ben, Tony has carried the mantle more efficiently than anyone else that I know. A lot of other brothers are carrying that mantle linguistically and other ways. But Tony not only carries it philosophically, and in terms of the work he does right there in the DC area to show us Kemet, but he's the only African American that was involved in an archaeological dig in Kemet, licensed and approved, and whose product is in the museum at Luxor for you to go and see. And I had one of the opportunity to bring my group to Kemet, go to the dig where Tony was working, and went down in that great big hole into that temple they dug in the ground. And it was such an amazing experience. And that they were able not only to come up with the temple that was there, but they found a pyramid, a Nubian pyramid that should not have been in what we call Kemet. It should have been further south, which implies there was another relationship going on earlier than we thought between these populations that we don't know about. So I'm just honored, Brother Jason, that you made the call to bring us together. I'm honored to always be with our people and trying to teach, my space is the spirituality aspect of looking at Kemet. And so I'm going to try to do some interpretive stuff on that today. But I have a line that says, history erases the mystery. And so I believe in history as one of the primary tools of elevating human consciousness, especially for the African peoples. Thank you.
Thank you. Brother Browder, I think it's your turn to start the interview of Dr.
Okay.
Small.
All right. And so I'm gonna follow your directions, brother. We're doing 20-minute turns interviewing, and I'll start. And so I want to begin by asking James a very basic and fundamental question. What does, the topic today is why Kemet matters. So I would like to ask you why Kemet matters to you. Why is it important?
Kemet matters because a child should always be able to refer back to the parent. Kemet is the parent of cosmology. Kemet is the parent of Scientology. Kemet is the parent of what we call sacred science or spirituality. All the civilizations in the West, um, Greece, and those that followed, refers to and defers to Kemet as the source of their scientific or civilized genesis. And for us, the African population, the Kemetian population, whether we are in North America, West Africa, Central Africa, South Africa, we know enough about our history to know that when that happy river started to flow north, and that Sahara and multiple river sources began to dry up, that we move towards the happy. And multiple African civilizations came together and created a mega civilization that lasted longer than any other that we know. So we got our science, and I'll just quote one of them. They have these giants like a Plato. And in the Western civilization, you get no higher than Plato. And in school, they taught us the Republic. We had to read the Republic. It was by Aristotle about Plato. But Plato had books of his own that they don't give us to read. And one of those books is called the Phaedra. And there's a man named Kujari who wrote a history of mathematics. And in his introductory chapter, paragraph 1, he quotes Plato from Phaedrus. And Plato says, the Ethiopians have given the world all of its sciences. And then he begins to quote them. He starts with medicine. He says, medicine, geometry, arithmetic, astronomy. This is Plato. Back in the day, this is their main boy. So I don't have to say nothing else about why. Here's the main man of Western civilization in his writing, which they keep from the public, giving Kemet credit for giving the foundation of civilization worldwide. This is even before we move into India. And we have populations in India 60,000 years old since when they left Kemet to go to India and carry what would become that civilization. And they give credit in all of their writing. Read the Rig Veda, the Upanishad, the Vedikams, and you'll see the reference back to Kush. And so you begin to understand. And at that time, different civilizations referred to Nile Valley by different names. And so Kemet matters because it is the source. When we think about spiritual consciousness, we think of Kemet and we look. I think, Tony, you were part of the writing, you and Ankh Ra and Theophila Banga, a piece you did out of the book, the pyramid text. And I do tell everybody, get a copy of this book and then read it. The one by Faulkner is the one Dr. Ben recommended for me, and I've been tearing it up for years. But in this piece that you guys translated, you had Amun saying, how did he say it? He was talking about his coming into being. I came into existence so that existing might exist. This is Amun. And when I realized that I existed, Ma'at was at my side. And I spat out Shu, the air, and I coughed up Tefnut, the moisture. And they gave birth to Geb, the earth, and to Nut, the elements in the sky. And they give birth eventually to man. And he goes further and says, after having created everything that my heart desired, I then expanded in it. And in the end, he says, but when I realized myself to be, I realized I came from my mother, Nun, the primordial black waters, which we call liquid matter, which is then quantum physics. So when you just take that piece, and I know I left a little bit out, Tony, but I think I remember, that's a lot of years ago, and I remembered some of it. And it's such a beautiful piece when you're talking about the Genesis story that everybody in the world borrows from, and it's right here in our earliest text, earliest known religious text in the world. And the translation that you guys did was so beautifully done. It just covers everything in a few minutes. And it let us see that everything we think we've learned from someone else, they learned it from Kemet. And that's why Kemet matters.
And well, thank you for that response and also for taking me back down memory lane. You mentioned Ankh Ra
Yeah.
and Teofilo Benga, right? So you're taking me back to gosh, the late 80s, early 90s when Obenga was applying for his green card to work at Temple and then San Francisco State. So Obenga wound up staying with Ankh Ra, who lived out here in Temple Hills, Maryland. Stayed with him for a couple of months while Ankh's wife, who was working for the State Department or some agency, was processing his paperwork. So Ankh would tell me that he and Teofilo Benga would sit up all night drinking beer and doing Medunecha. So it was that kind of relationship that led to these brothers deciphering Medunecha and reinterpreting the knowledge, the history, the culture, the science, and philosophy that Europeans have had a stranglehold on for centuries. So Kemet matters more than we could ever imagine. And so with you taking me back down memory lane by recalling some names of people who are near and dear to my heart, I'd like for you to share with the audience what these names, I got 5 names that I'm going to mention, and I'd like for you to briefly talk about the role of these people in your life and how they shape your perception of Africa
Yes.
and Kemet to the extent that it does. The first is Sister Ella Collins. Who is Sister Ella, and why is she important to your development?
Oh, yeah. Ella Collins is the sister of Malcolm X. She was the lady who adopted him as a teen, brought him to Boston. And really, she is his second mom. She was my second or third mom. I was her personal bodyguard for about 13 years. And I even funeralized her. I was the imam. I became the imam of the Muslim mosque under her guidance. Um, and I performed her janazah. They came all the way from Saudi Arabia to perform the janazah. The king sent, and I told them, no, you can't do that. I have to do this. And so Ella Collins was very quiet lady, very powerful political force in Boston. You would not have gotten a Tip O'Neill in Congress had it not been for Ella Collins. She knew Tip when he was a dog catcher in Roxbury. She helped him get elected to city council and then to the Congress. And he did deliver for the black community. Our first congressman from black senator from Boston, Ella Collins, was behind his getting into the Senate. She knew him when he came from the Second World War. His plane had been shot down, and he was hidden in a farm barn by this Italian woman, and they fell in love. And so Ella gave him the money to fly back to Italy to marry that woman and bring her back to America, and then help him get elected as the first congressman since Reconstruction to the U.S. Congress. She was that kind of behind the scene person. We worked very closely with the Black Panther Party. Most of the Black Panther leadership came out of our organization. Sekou Odinga from the Black Liberation Army, who liberated Assata Shakur, was in our organization. Lumumba Shakur, Zaid Shakur, Matula Shakur, all of these guys came out of our organization. I actually got married 54 years ago in Ella's bedroom. Okay. Me and my beautiful wife, Carol, who's downstairs, probably listening in also. Um, she was a very powerful lady. And I remember one night back in 71, we got arrested in LA, 77 Precinct, Orange County. There was some bad boys out there. Okay. I got beat up like really bad. Ella's hand got broken in seventh place. But during that whole thing, the only thing she was doing is making sure I was all right. They're beating the hell out of her too. But she's fighting to make sure you better not hurt Brother Small. Brother Small better be all right. She was that kind of a soldier. Um, like I said, she was a mother to me, my leader, taught me so much. But she was an in the trench person. Most people don't know her name. You would say a lot about Malcolm X, but you would not have gotten a Malcolm X without an Ella Collins. The family was from Georgia, very tough family. She helped raise some of her other brothers and sisters, all of whom joined the Nation of Islam. And she was originally in the Nation of Islam as well. And she's the one that originally founded the first daycare center, and that would become the foundation for the University of Islam for the nation. Of course, Malcolm would kick her out because she was too honorary, and he ended up kicking his own sister out of the nation. But she was just a beautiful, revolutionary political mind that helped a lot of people. We did a lot of things. She operated more clandestinely than Malcolm. I remember one day she called me to the phone. She said, somebody want to speak to you. And I go to the phone, and who's on the phone but the Ayatollah Khomeini from Iran, calling to let us know that they were using Malcolm's autobiography as the catechism in the training of the mullahs. That was a big deal. When we were in jail, she had that kind of connections. When we were in jail in LA, and I was in a situation, when I'm saying, so I could talk about it now, I'm an old man, 80 years old, but I'm on my knees behind a gas station, a pistol in my mouth. Dude trying to get me to sign this confession that I had $1 million worth of heroin and some stolen pistols. And 3 cars roll up and some guys jump out in black suits and arguing. And they take me from these policemen and take me to Los Angeles Central. I would find out the next week these guys in black is FBI agents, And they saved me from the LAPD on a phone call from Yasser Arafat because Yasser Arafat was a friend of Ella Collins. So when you think of Ella Collins, you have to think of that expanse, that kind of woman. Nobody, if you ask people, the average person don't know her name, but she was an extraordinary political force behind the scenes, working with the Urban League, NACP, and many other groups, but you didn't see her. When the Panthers were captured in Boston, we negotiated that release with the city council leadership in her living room to get all of those brothers and sisters out of jail. This is back in what, late 60s? Yeah.
Well,
So Ella Collins is an extraordinary figure that we need. I'm hoping to finish my writing about her so people can know her name.
all right, well, Brother James, I was going to ask you to similarly talk about your relationships with four other people, but as I see already, you can do an hour talking
On
about
any
each of
one
these
of them,
people,
huh?
and I
Yeah.
hope I trust you're going to write your book and
I'm
tell these
working on it,
stories, man,
Tony.
because you you
I'm
you have
working
some
on it.
stories.
You know.
So look, I'm going to jump ahead then and ask you to describe your relationship with this brother, and then that's going to fold into the last question that I'll give you in this round. Another person that I want you to describe your relationship with is John Henry Clark.
Oh, Dr. Clark. Quickly, Dr. Clark was all of our fathers and all of our uncles in Harlem.
Okay, we just lost James. James, we lost your audio. Hold on for 1 second. You're muted. There.
Okay. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We can hear you. You're
Okay.
fine.
Yes. So I was Dr. Clark's official linguist. In the Ghanaian system, he was a chief in the Ga tradition. And so, as a chief in the tradition, you should have a linguist that would speak to the public on your behalf. So, I was his official linguist. I also was the guy that went every year with the brothers and paint his house, and I put up the drywall ceiling in his bathroom and those sort of things. And we were just close. Of course, me and the Sons of Africa always maintaining his security for as much as we could. And everywhere he walked, every word of his mouth was a lesson. This man taught in his sleep. And if you were around him for 10 minutes, you got a dissertation of lectures that fortified you psychologically. And he was humble. It was the humbleness about Dr. Clark that made him just one of the sweetest personality you want to walk with. You know, you've got to honor him for
Well,
eternity.
speaking of honoring Dr. Clark, it was 30 years ago this year that one of your former students, Wesley Snipes, honored Dr. Clark
Yes.
by premiering the film in downtown Manhattan, Dr. John Henry Clark, A Great and Mighty Walk. Can you talk briefly about your relationship with Wesley Snipes and that
Yes.
film and Wesley's, how Wesley and Lawrence Fishburne's relationship with Dr. Clark and Jeffries and Ben and others, how that shaped their consciousness?
Right. Well, Wesley and I belong to the same dojo, the New Breed Dojo in Harlem, studying martial arts together. And he would come to our classes at City College and then began to come and sit in my office for 2 and 3 hours a week and coming to the classes of Dr. Jeffries and myself. And that led to him coming to the First World Alliance, where he got close to both Dr. Clark and Dr. Jeffries. Now, the First World Alliance was a community lecture series that happened every Saturday in Harlem and would always feature Francis Welsing, Asa Hilliard, Dr. Clark, Dr. Ben. Wesley would be there every Saturday with an entourage of young people. And he would always sit on the floor. He would sit on the floor in front of the lectern. And so he became a part of that whole learning process that was taking place then. And out of that, the idea to create this historical journal that became the Great and Mighty Walk. He also created one for Dr. Ben, which never came out because he did not like the editing. And while he was fussing back and forth, that's when he went to jail on that tax thing. And, life takes a different course. But he became almost like a son to Dr. Clark, you know? And he monitored every hour, every minute of the editing of that piece until it was done to his perfection and Dr. Clark's satisfaction. Um, so he was just one of the family, one of the young people who was trying to do the right thing with the skills he had. And the industry, of course, made him pay for that because he created Amun Ra Productions. And look at the name he chose, Amun Ra Productions. And they did not like that at all, so, but he didn't mind paying the price. I mean, he paid the price. He went to jail. That was a price he didn't have to do. But the judge said, I'm sentencing you because you're a celebrity. He meant to say a black celebrity. And he did that to that young man unnecessarily. But he survived. He's all right. Him and his family, he's doing well. The kids are grown. So, but he loved learning and he loved Doc. And then him and Dr. Clark got extremely close. Him and Dr. Ben got extremely close. Him and Dr. Jeffries always was. That was his partner. Even when Dr. Jeffries was going through the crises with the whole world coming against it, Wesley would come every day and visibly every Saturday sit in front of the lectern where he would speak so the world could see him sitting there. Extraordinary man, extraordinary relationships.
So that documentary, A Great and Mighty Walk, begins with Dr. Clark's famous statement that history is the clock that people use to tell their political and cultural time of day. So if, in fact, history is also the compass that people use to find themselves on the map of human geography, in your 80 years of life and some 65, 70 years involved in the struggle, what time of day is it right now? What is it that we should be doing, and where is it we should be going?
We are right at the point of some of the greatest victories we will ever have. A lot of people think because the white media is quiet about Black struggle, they're making a mistake in the intensity of the Black youth of today and their determination and self-determination to have freedom, to have equality, to have justice in their world. And so we're looking all over the continent of Africa, and all we can hear is that we're going to build the Africa that we want to see. We see youth movement everywhere. We see more youth getting involved in the government and pushing it more towards an African-centered perspective. Many of them will quote Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark more quickly than we do. Many of them will put Asa Hilliard's lectures up on screen. So there is a real Pan-Africanism, because Pan-Africanism is not an organization. It is the process of unity of a people. And those unities come from ideas that are brought to a people and directives that are brought to a people by their elders. And so I see the technocracy being used more directly to develop our societies now. Yes, there's still danger. Yes, we still have enemy. Yes, we still have to protect the Tuaregs and the other young people. We lost Magufuli in Tanzania, but we learned from that. But I look all over the continent and I see the young leaders and even some of the older leaders are turning towards Nkrumah's ideas and concept of unity. And so I really believe we are in a better position now than we've ever been in getting our freedom back.
Well, thank you for that, James. And I'm good at following orders, following instructions. So, Jason, I've done my 21 minutes with Brother James, so we can flip it now. And James, I'll toss you the lead microphone, and you can ask some questions of me.
Yes, sir. Well, Brother Anthony, I'm always honored. But the one thing, because we never really had a chance to sit down and talk about it, and I remember the intensity of it when you were doing the dig and going through the process of discovering that temple and those pyramids. Tell us what was going through your mind with your being the first one of us to have an opportunity to go to that height. Even Dr. Ben could only dream of that, but you did it. So tell us about that.
Well, one of the most significant moments in that endeavor came in July of 2010. The whole idea of the Asa Restoration Project was my way of honoring Baba Asa Hilliard, who was, like a father figure to me, and who had passed in Egypt on August 13th, 2007. And the Asa Restoration Project was my way of honoring a man who meant the world to me. And I was blessed to have this opportunity to work with Alina Pistakova, who had found these lost tombs of Kushite noblemen. And she shared with me her discovery, but told me that she had run out of money. And as I was looking at the beginnings of the work, I could hear Asa in one ear and Dr. Clark in the other ear saying, we prepared you for this. You can handle this. And I just told her, well, look, I'll make sure you get the money so that this process can continue. And the idea came to mind to create the Asa Restoration Project. And I started raising funds. So my biggest challenge throughout this 15-year ordeal has been to raise the money to meet our financial obligations, which were initially $40,000 a year, and they swelled to over $100,000 a year. So in 2010, we were struggling to make payroll. Every Thursday is when our guys got paid. We had a crew of at least 100 people working at the site, and whenever money was short for the payroll, then I had to go to the ATM machine and draw money out of my account. So, funds were low on my end, and I knew that we needed a big discovery in order for me to share with the community back here that this is a project worthy of their investment. And I remember one afternoon just walking off to a corner of the tomb and making prayer to Karakamen, telling him that, we come here to this site not as tomb robbers, but tomb restorers. And that it's our responsibility to be able to document what your people have done here. But I need some help. I need some big discovery to share with my people back home so we can get some more money so that this work can continue. And a voice came to me, a voice that I know was more inspiration than imagination, said, have them dig over there, over to the far portion of the second pillared hall, which we had just recently uncovered. And so I grabbed a couple of guys and told them to start digging in this area. And about 2 hours later, I'm somewhere at the site doing something, and I hear my name, Tony, come here. And I come to where people were calling me, and these workers had just unearthed 2 steps going down into the ground. So those 2 steps ultimately turned into 10 steps, which led to a burial compartment 10 feet under the ground. And in that burial compartment was a room that had a shaft, a 5 foot by 6 foot wide shaft. And that shaft descended into the earth another 30 feet. And at the bottom of that shaft was Karakamen's burial chamber. And that's where we made, the biggest discovery of our excavations, of finding Karakamen's burial chamber with that beautiful image of newt, an African newt painted on the ceiling. And so that August, Atlantis had come back and was working with me at the site. So there's a photograph of Atlantis and I sitting on a pile of debris in Karakamen's burial chamber. And that was the highlight of that episode for me, or one of the highlights. But it also reinforced something that I'm really beginning to get a deeper understanding of, James. And you've helped to put this thought in my consciousness, that I know that I've done what I've done because I'm in tune with the ancestors. I hear them and they guide me, and I follow their direction. And that's how I've been able to do all these incredible things. And I feel a connection with these, Kushite ancestors. And it reminds me of something that I've heard you say frequently, that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And when we understand that's the relationship. We're spirit in physical form. And
Yes.
when we open ourselves up to spirit, then we become the conduits through which spirit can work through in order to make things happen here on the physical plane. And that's, that's the relationship, man. And that's one of the things that you help to bring to my awareness.
Thank you, brother. And that's a heavy place to be because that is the foundation of Kemetic civilization. We think because we see all of the gigantic monuments that it's about physical architecture. No, the physical architecture is trying to tell a spiritual story, you know. And when we study the physical architecture, we realize the spiritual narrative that's being told. Now, you brought it all home to us in DC, and I want to know, when you talk about Meridian Park, when you take us through the different Masonic temples, we know that many of our people are Freemasons. I myself, I'm a Prince Hall Mason. I'm very proud of being a Prince Hall Mason. Cornerstone 37, New York State Grand Lodge, and I never back away from that because I know this comes from Kemet. We worked in the craft together, so we know the linkages to Kemet. So tell us about what made you want to tell the story using Washington, D.C., its outline, its design, other things in the city like Meridian Park, and just to tell our story and to show people Kemet in Washington is really what you've done.
Yeah, well, most people know that I'm from Chicago originally, and Chicago is the home of architecture. The first skyscraper was built in Chicago, and I had aspirations when I was in high school to become an architect. So I've always had a fascination with design, with building, how buildings are constructed, how buildings influence the consciousness of people who work in them, live in them, or move around them. And when I came to DC in '71, I changed my major from architecture to design. So I've always had this interest in art and being this ability to be able to decode the symbolism in art and architecture. So it was after my second trip to Egypt in 1985 that I came back to DC, and I kept having flashbacks of Egypt. I kept seeing Egypt or Kemet throughout DC. The Washington Monument is one obvious example. But as I moved around Meridian Hill Park, I noticed, the Tekenu in Meridian Hill Park, and that they were strategically placed. There's a total of 10, and they're placed in pairs, and they're strategically placed throughout the park. I noticed the cascading waterfall at Meridian Hill, and the reflection pool at the end of the waterfall, and the exedra right above that, and all those three shapes put together form an ankh with the paratekin on either side. And in the reflection pool, every year the U.S. Park Service plants papyrus and lotus plants, the plants that were part of the Simatawi, the symbol of unification in Kemet. So I saw all of these connections, which individually may not have meant anything, but collectively were telling the story that Kemet was in Washington, D.C. So that was the seed of what has become Egypt on the Potomac. And this year marks our 40th anniversary of that field trip, Egypt on the Potomac field trip. So, when I first created it, I had thought that white Masons, George Washington and Benjamin Franklin and others, had taken the secrets of Kemet and used those secrets to create Washington, D.C., which was the first planned capital. And they used the power associated with Kemet in order to create the capital of what is now the wealthiest and most powerful nation in human history. But now that I'm older and have much more experience, I can reflect on what I knew and now have a better understanding of what I thought I knew. And, based on conversations that we've had, James, I now see that it wasn't the white Scottish Rite Masons who were really doing this. It was the African spirit working through white folk and the Africans, free and enslaved Africans, Benjamin Banneker being one of them, who were responsible for making sure that certain information was preserved and certain information was intentionally planted in the soil of the capital of Washington, D.C., in order to remind those African people when they were ready who they were, what they've done, and what they have the capacity to do. So my understanding of this field trip I created 40 years ago has expanded beyond my wildest imaginations. And as you said in answering the last question I put to you, I think our better days are ahead because we have buried in the soil around us, buried in our consciousness, and right at our fingertips all the tools that we need to free ourselves and to free future generations. So this is a great time to be alive, despite what's happening in other corners of the world. And I am looking forward to what the next generations after us, your children, your grandchildren, and our great grandchildren are going to produce, because they will be standing on the shoulders of giants who have given them the black print for how we should live our best lives. And so that's that answer.
Thank you so much, sir. I mean, you're always a very modest brother, um, but you're an extraordinary scholar, but you're an extraordinary sacred scientist. And let me kind of explain to our people, because I know we like the word spirituality, and it's a good word. It describes part of a process of how we become gods again, or become conscious of being gods again in an African cultural sphere. But the sacred science that help us reorganize our consciousness to get there, that's what you've been doing for us. You've been teaching African sacred science. Most people have looked at Western religion, and then they look in Africa for some stylized prototype. So they can say, oh, we got a religion too. But African sacred science is bigger than that. It is the universe itself. It is the universe being aware of itself. And that's what you are. You are a universe that have become aware of itself. And you can see things that the rest of us will miss. And that's why when I saw a piece that you did lately, and then you could tell us about this one Masonic temple that you went into, to the degree that you can tell, because we understand there are secret societies and they are societies of secrets. So we know there are things we can't say, but there are things we can enlighten the public. So just a little bit on that, the last piece you were dealing with, I forgot which one of the big temples downtown DC, um, just to give us a sense of what's in there. That's us. I mean, I know and you know, but our general population don't know. If they open those doors, all they're going to see is Kemetic symbols, you know.
And to that point, James, when you reference their societies with secrets, and people want to accuse you of holding information, well, the important
It's respect.
it's respect, and it's also a matter of understanding that until you prove that you're capable of handling certain knowledge and information,
You shouldn't have it.
if you don't know how to use it, it can cause more harm than good. It's like putting a pistol in the hands of a child, right? So you have to prove your worth, and that's one of the things that I talk about in the field trip when we visit the two Masonic temples. We have the Scottish Rite Temple for 32nd degree Masonry at 16th and Harvard, and then there's the House of the Temple at 16th and S. Well, I was doing, I had a group of high school students from my daughter's former high school, Archbishop Carroll. So all black students standing at the door of this temple, and I'm explaining to them the symbolism of the steps, the symbolism of the door, the symbolism of the entrance to the temple, and the African symbolism on the plaques on either side of the door. And as we're talking, I see a white member of that lodge come out, and he's standing to the side and he's watching me talking about this history to these students. And there's a point in the field trip where I give them a quiz, and they have to answer the quiz in order to get back on the bus to go to the next site. And when the students broke to prepare for the quiz, the white Mason came to me and he said, you can get in trouble for talking about that information. And I turned to him and I said, well, that's only if you don't know what you're talking about. So let me finish my conversation with these young folk, and then you and I can finish the conversation. So I turned to the young folk and I asked them to identify something on 16th Street. And this one brother, about 14 years old, he looked up, he saw what I was asking. He gave the answer, and he was on it. He was sharp, and he was on it. So,
Mm.
I congratulated him and told the students to get back on the bus. I turned to the white mason to finish my conversation, and he's sitting there with his mouth wide open. He said, "Well, I didn't know that." So, long story short, once we start talking, and he kind of tests me and throws a couple of things out here to see what I know, and once I answer the question beyond his satisfaction, he gets excited and he says to me, he shows me this book, and he says, "Look, I want you to see this. This is a directory of all of the members in this lodge." And he opens the book and fans the pages of the book so that I can see all these pictures of white men and their various titles within this Masonic temple for 32nd degree Masons. And then he turns to me with a look of satisfaction on his face, and he says, "These men look white, but they're not. They're really African." And I said, "Well, let me shake your hand, and I want to thank you for telling me the truth. I want to thank you for telling me what I already knew, and that is that when these white men study in that lodge, they're studying African history. They're studying Kemetic history. They're studying what you and I have dedicated our lives to studying and sharing with the community that we love, and that these white men gathered there to study African people, not Negro people, not Negro history, not black history, not colored history, but African history. And they are duty bound to acknowledge an African man or woman who knows who he or she is. So they know that we are the original man and woman. They know that we created architecture and masonry and the sacred sciences that you've been talking about, that we are the foundation. And they are duty bound to acknowledge a person who knows. And so that being the case, I think the work that you and I have been doing, and the colleagues that we work with, Sister Segmet, I can't have this conversation without calling for Sister Segmet. It's ancestral work that's a continuation of the work that we've done, all of our lives, all of our lifetimes. So that's what this whole mission is all about. That's why we're doing this. And that's why I'm grateful that Brother Jason extended this opportunity to us to have this conversation for the benefit of everyone who's listening and watching, because there is information which I refer to as forbidden knowledge, information that's not taught in HBCUs, it's not taught in churches, it's not taught in fraternities or sororities or Masonic lodges, but information that's crucial to our ability to thrive as human beings. And so that's our mission. And, we're grateful for the opportunity to share what we love to do with minds that are open and prepared to receive this information.
Thank you, Brother Tony. That's beautiful. I got one more thing, and then I'll let you rest your spirit. Because have you been to Kemet, to the new museum?
I was there 2 years ago
Okay.
in 24, and it was only partially open at the time. And I was partially impressed.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to seeing it when I go back in June.
Okay. So we'll have to wait until then. I did go last summer, and I was very impressed. Um, and I took one of my grandchildren. She was 15, and she was having a little trouble, young lady in the school system today, and all of the pressures coming on my baby. And I said, I got to get her to Africa. Nothing in her life has been more transformative than 24 hours in Kemet. She was with me in Ghana for nearly a week and a half. We were in Kemet for a day and a half. And I remember, my old knees, I can't climb up in the pyramids anymore. But this little baby, she goes all the way to the top, and I see somebody across the field screaming, "Grandpa, Grandpa, I did it, Grandpa, I did it." And I said, "You did what?" She says, "I got to the top of the pyramid, and I stood over the king's tomb." Oh my goodness, I didn't even know she knew there was a King's tomb up there, right? But when you see the psycho-spiritual transformation of that child coming back, going back to school, she's studying to be, what do you call it? To be, when you're an animal doctor, uh,
A
um,
veterinarian.
veterinarian,
Mm-hmm.
because her dad's a vet. So she does half day in school with the general curriculum, and the last half she's at the vet clinics and she's working and just to watch her move from an average 75 to 95. You understand? In that one semester, and meeting with the guidance counselor and saying, we don't know what happened. I said, Kemet happened. You know what I'm saying? Going home to Africa happened. And I took a second granddaughter also who was 19. She was just starting Norfolk State, studying nursing. I see the same transformation. Going home, and especially to Kemet, and physically experiencing those objects, those tombs, that smell, those writing, those people. For kids who, yes, they were my grandkids and they've heard granddaddy, but they've rejected most of what grandpa had to say. But when they went to face it, it was transformative. My babies send me that. You ever have kids send grandpa the cards every grading session? They send me their cards. Let me see I go like, wow, none of the others ever did this. But it's just, I want our people to know that history truly transformed the consciousness of our children, and an understanding, just a partial understanding, like some of what we're trying to give today, really expand our consciousness so that we can see that we are ecology and cosmology. Our divine is not a man, it's not a woman, it's the totality of everything that exists. And we are an aspect of that totality. And though we may anthropomorphically use a male or female to symbolize the ideas, it is the greater cosmic ideas that we're trying to explain to ourselves. And I appreciate you, my dear brother, so much. I mean, your brilliance is it's like flowing water. You know, it has the rhythm. You are a living spirit, and we have to appreciate that. And brothers have to also know, and this is no disrespect to sisters, but brothers have to learn to love and respect brothers. You know, we've lost that in a lot of spaces. You know, I have two brothers older than me. We never hang up a phone without saying, I love you. You know, I still call my younger sister sweeties. You know what I'm saying? I love them. And so we have to learn that that thing called love is really an energy source. It is a vibration. It is a rhythmic pattern. And it is healthy for us to utilize it and to call it into being. And that's a big part of our culture as African peoples. And I know my brothers from the fraternity, and my son is one of your members, who called this moment into being. You, Jason, call this moment into being. You are the children of the sun, literally. Of course, you know that. And I know there was a time Tony can tell you, because I scared one of our young brothers so much 40 years ago when I was harsh on the fraternities, really harsh. But I too had to learn, you know, and to get a greater, deeper understanding of what our elders was trying to bring to us, to teach us, to transform us, to turn us into lights for those coming behind us. And so it's the fraternities, y'all have a great responsibility to define the Divine Nine isn't just a culture club or play clubs. You are the leadership. You are the talented 10 that the boys was talking about. He wasn't talking about a talented 10 that was above their people, but a talented 10 that was the servant of their people. And so as we have these dialogues, please let's not forget to see the mirror in front of us so we know who we are. We didn't lose Africa coming to the Americas. We simply hid it in different places. And one thing traveling back and forth and studying do it familiarized you so much with things African, you begin to recognize what we've hid, as Tony was describing in Meridian Park and the Masonic Temple, the places that things have been hiding right in our face. But because we don't know Kemet, we didn't recognize our own image right in our face. So that little piece I wanted to add, Tony, I know we passed your 20 minutes of my 20 minutes, but I thought that that's important. I don't want the brothers to just think they're spectators. The sorority and fraternities, you are the leading element of the African community worldwide. Take your role seriously. Do your due diligence, meet your responsibilities. I was so proud. I looked up, I think it was about a month ago, and 500, I think was it AKAs standing in the slave dungeon at Cape Coast. I goes, oh my God, I knew the world just flipped then. Do you realize the implication of that?
Mm,
Do you realize the implication of that?
powerful.
That was extraordinary.
Yeah.
And
And
so,
the important thing about that trip, James, is that that trip sold out in 24 hours.
wow.
24 hours. So, the sisters are doing it.
Yeah.
And, with regards to your description of how the trip to Kemet last year influenced your granddaughter, Sister Lisa Douglas and Sharon Pringle coined the phrase Kemetamorphosis, which
Right. I remember.
describes that transformation of consciousness that
Yes.
comes upon a prepared soul who travels to the Nile Valley with the right teacher, and they connect with the ancestors. They connect with that spirit that unifies the past with the present and helps to create the future. So that's what this whole thing is about, man. Let me ask you this one question, because I know it's 3:03 now, but I want to ask you this one question before we go. A number of years ago in the 90s, you, myself, and Segmet were in Ghana, in Accra, and we were sitting down in the restaurant drinking beer, just talking, and you all were talking about, the idea that Segmet was responsible for putting forward, but she acknowledged that you had put the idea in her head, post-traumatic slavery disorder, right?
Right. Right.
That you put that
Right.
idea in her head, and she just expanded on it. Can you share with those listening and watching for a minute what that concept is and what it really represents?
Right. No, in my class at City College one day, I was teaching, and there was one of my students this winter, and she kept coming wearing these dark glasses. And so one day I had her stay after class. When everybody left, I snatched the glasses, and I saw she had bruises. So I finally convinced her to tell me the situation. And the situation was, what's that term they use? A battered woman's situation. So, I had the Sons of Africa. And so I asked if I could come by her house and pay a visit to the person who was responsible. And me and the sons showed up and we paid a visit. And when we got to visiting, we called the police to finish that situation. That young lady and her struggle later became the director of the battered woman division at Harlem Hospital. It was in that process when she woke me up, I started looking at the behavior of Black men and how we were mimicking the white men who abused us. And I was looking for a word for it, so I call it the Stockholm syndrome. When a prisoner is captured, that prisoner, to minimize the pain, psychologically become the pain giver instead of the pain receiver. And I was trying to find a way to talk about it. So me and Segment is riding down the street in Baltimore, and I'm telling her what I'm feeling, what I'm going through, and what I want to find out. And she said she was counseling some brothers who was going through an extraordinary thing in a gay thing and trying to reckon with who they were and how they fit in society. And she was calling it post-traumatic stress was some of what they were going through. And we took post-traumatic stress, and by the time we got to the junior college where I was speaking, we had come up with post-slavery trauma syndrome. post being the past, when this harm was done, slavery being the conditions under which the damage is being done. So the trauma is the actual injury, both psychologically, spiritually, and physically. And then the syndrome is that it is continuous and we're unaware of it. And so that's what post-slavery trauma syndrome, I think that was 1992, right? Because the next week, 2 weeks later, we would be speaking on it in Philly. The term had just derived. And then Segmet would write a little pamphlet on it. I wish I could find that pamphlet that she did, showing that she wanted to do further writings on it, but she didn't live long enough to finish those writings. But we know our sister Joy Degree, who came along she was a youngster then, she was still in college when we were out there trying to do this. But she came and expanded it and researched it and took it to a whole nother level. And it was due to, I would tell everyone to find Dr. Degree's book on post-traumatic stress slavery disorder and read it. I like the term we use, post-slavery trauma syndrome, PSTS, because I think it more directly describes it. But Joy's work is landmarking in terms of, as a psychiatrist, she was able to take the work that Segmet was doing to another whole level for us to get an understanding of it.
James, that's an excellent example of what today's conversation should seed for those younger people who are watching. You know, we've got ideas, thoughts, and ideas that we're laying out to folk who are younger than us, and it's their responsibility to take these kernel of ideas, take this inspiration to the next level. Do the research. That's the key thing. Do the research.
Yes, do the research.
And a lot of the research needs to be done offline. Get away from YouTube. Get away from, go to a library, sit down and read, check out some references, and build a case as to why X, Y, and Z matters. So,
let me just show this book.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, the General History of Africa. I mean, by all 8, I think they came up with 2 new volumes last year. I've got 8. But on this one is when you can really get into Kemet and see so much of the ideas, see Diop's writing, Obanga's writing, and others. So there's a lot of good work out here that our people have done that we don't have to rewrite a lot of this stuff. We need to do the research, we need to study, we need to do the reading, and you will be surprised that a lot of the answers that you think it's too far away is just an arm's distance from pulling that book off of the shelf and reading it. Now, I'm a reader. I love to read. You can look around me and see like I'm like a book person, right? I love reading. Addicted to it. I'll be up 3-4 hours before I wake up and realize I've been reading for 3 hours. You know.
So, brothers, since we got a little break in the action, you were giving us so much knowledge. I didn't want to interrupt. We do want to get some Q&A in. The first question that we do have is, what is the connection between Kemet and the Bible? And the second question is, what is the connection between Kemet and Islam? If you don't mind, Brother Browder, would you be able to talk about the Trinity and the connection? And Brother Small, would you be able to talk about the connection between Islam and Kemet? And then I'll hand it over to Brother Ashman to handle the Q&A from here on.
All right, Jason, that's why you're the president of the chapter. You know what question to ask of whom. Kemet matters because Kemet is the first place we know of where a people conceived of a God concept. God is a concept. And they, as Brother James said at the top of this interview, he referenced from Faulkner's book, a reinterpretation that Uncle Ra and Teofilo Obenga did of Genesis. The oldest story of Genesis comes out of the Nile Valley. And so we find that Kemet, and I also have to add Cush, because Kemet is a byproduct of Cush. And Kemet and Cush are a byproduct of Ethiopia. So when we talk of the Nile Valley, I'm speaking of at least the area from the Blue Nile south, where the elements of Kemetic knowledge sprang from. So we know that the story of the founding of Kemet, the unification of the two lands by Asar and his wife Aset, is an important story, and that it was Asar who was killed by his brother Set. His body was dismembered, and through Aset then finding the missing pieces of Asar's body and literally remembering him, finding the body parts, cleaning them, wrapping them in bandages, and preparing her husband for burial, created the opportunity for the spirit of Asar to impregnate his virgin wife so that she could give birth to their son, Heru. So Heru, who was literally the reincarnation of his father, Asar, could come back into a physical form and continue his father's work. That story is carved in many temples and monuments in Kemet. You can go to the Temple of Abydos and see the scene where Set is impregnated by the spirit of her deceased husband. You could go to the Temple of Edfu to see where her son Heru is defeating the man who murdered his father and becomes the heir to the throne of Kemet. And so it's from these stories that we have the story of the virgin birth, of the Immaculate Conception, of the birth of a Heru type or Jesus type of personality who became the savior of the world. It's from this story that we get the first story of a resurrection. After Heru defeated Set and reclaimed his father's throne, then his father Asar was resurrected from the dead. So the story of Asar is the first story in recorded history of a resurrection. And the symbol of resurrection is the Tekken, the so-called obelisk, the symbol that the Washington Monument is. The same symbol that is in the center of St. Peter's Square that last Sunday the Pope delivered the Easter sermon talking about the resurrection of Jesus the Christ to a crowd of 150,000 people gathered in St. Peter's Square around the Tekken, a 6,000-year-old symbol that represents the resurrection of Asar. These people in the Vatican know the original story, but they share with the public the story that the general public has been used to internalizing. So the people behind the door know the real story, and they acknowledge Asar, Aset, and Heru. Trust me, I've been to the Vatican, and I know of what I speak. So it's so critically important that we understand the primacy of Kemet, and it's also even more important that we understand that our oppressors are not going to teach us this information. It's not their job. It's not their responsibility. Knowledge is the passport to freedom. So if we truly want physical freedom, mental freedom, and spiritual freedom, we have to be the instruments of our own mental liberation, the instruments of our own cultural liberation. We've got to know Kemet. We've got to know the Nile Valley. We've got to know and love African history and culture. And by cultivating that love affair, we then become the best vessels that our ancestors can work through in order to ensure that this knowledge moves forward and continues to unfold within the consciousness of future generations. So that's what religion was created to do, to make people aware of their consciousness. And so the Abrahamic faith, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, is a faith that didn't exist prior to be perfectly honest with you, the Old Testament didn't exist prior to 500 BC. It did not exist prior to 500 BC. And that story is rooted in stories that go back to at least 4000 BCE in the Nile Valley. So knowledge is freedom. And Brother James can share information about how this freedom knowledge has been expressed through Islam.
Thank you, Brother Tony. I was scampering around for a book, and I'm going to show people, and I'll tell you I'm a book person, right? And this book is Islam and Ancient Mysteries, Volume 1, The Mystery Schools. And it's done by a young scholar who was actually teaching at the American University in Cairo when he invited me over to speak on Malcolm. And I go like, I'm not coming. I'll Zoom, but I'm not coming over there and speak about Malcolm. but he did the research to show the linkage between Islam and the ancient mysteries of Kemet. And very few people know of this document, but I think people should try to get it. Islam and the Ancient Mysteries, Volume 1, by Maurice Hines. Brother Maurice Hines. Volume 1, The Mystery Schools, Islam and the Ancient Mysteries. When he published his dissertation, of course, he could not put everything that he put in the book in the dissertation because it would have never passed. But he did get the work finished. Um, there's a prayer in Arabic. It goes, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Kul hu Allah ahad, Allah samad, walam yalid, walam yulad, walam yakulu for one, ahad, Allahu Akbar. It is called the Ikhlas. It's a prayer that says, know that God is one. He is created by none, nor has he created none. There's none in existence really but God. Well, and there's a pharaoh of the 18th dynasty. His name is Akhenaten, and he has a prayer. It is almost word for word the Ikhlas, the same prayer. O soul God, you who have given birth to none, and who is given birth to by none, and is none likened unto you, O Aton, and I, Akhenaten, am your servant. Almost word for word. But when you go back deeper into just looking at the rituals, which are very important, the prayer rituals in Islam, the sajda, when he says, "A'udhu billahi min shaitanir rajim," and you fold your arms across, that's exactly how the ancient Egyptian prayed. In their second division, they prayed by putting their hands on their knees, and then they went down and bowed down to the floor before coming back up and doing that again. Those three major movements in the Kemetic prayer ritual are the three major movements in the Islamic prayer ritual. As the Islamic prayer ritual, to go into prayer, we do wudu, we wash our hands up to our elbow, we wash our ears, we wash our head and our face. Kemet had the same rituals, including the full ablution. If you had had sex or anything before prayer, you'd have to then take a full bath. All of the rituals that became the rituals of Islam was the rituals of Kemet. But the most stark one you don't pay attention to because it's too obvious. There's a black sacred building in Mecca. I've been to that building. I've circumvented it. I've kissed the stone on 3 occasions. Well, it's called the Kaaba. And when you study Medunetia, you learn about the Ka and the Ba, the spirit and the soul. And when it comes together, you become the house of the divine. And the word Kaaba in Mecca means the same thing. Beitu Allah, the house of Allah, the house of the divine. The concept is right up out of Kemet. Do you hear it? Do you see it? Can you picture it? But if you don't know history, you'll miss the mystery, which is right in front of your eyes, right on your ears. Those are just a couple of the things. And there's another extraordinary book that was written a few years ago. And the Arabs helped to finance the book initially. And when they realized what the brothers were writing about, they pulled their money from the book. Now, these brothers are from the Nation of Islam. And the book is called Egyptian Sacred Science in Al-Islam. Egyptian Sacred Science in Al-Islam. And then one of the brothers have gone to the ancestors, but one of them is still with us. And mine is falling apart. But it's I'm going to give you the author's name. Thomas Goodwin and Rafiq Bilal are the authors. Thomas Goodwin, Rafiq Bilal, Ancient Egyptian Sacred Science in Al-Islam. That book, along with this book, will really open your eyes to how there's nothing in Islam that didn't come out of ancient Kemet, even to its most sacred symbols, the Kaaba itself.
Brother Ashman, I'll see if he'll get on. The next question was, and I guess both of you brothers can speak to this, speak about the link between masonry and Kemet.
Did you?
Well, let me just say this in terms of what Masonry is. It's an institution where uh, boys were taught to be men,
Yeah, yeah.
and men were taught to be better than themselves, not better than others. It's an educational process. It's a rite of passage process that's required for the continuation of any nation, state, or institution. So this idea of socializing men is essential for any person's development. When I say men, I'm using the word men in its literal definition. The Sanskrit word, the word man means mind. And so these institutions and organizations were not just for males, they were for males and females. Because you can't create a nation and maintain a nation without both sexes, the men and the women, husbands and the wives, being equally paired. And so we find in Kemet that was the foundation of the culture. As I mentioned previously, the foundation of Kemet was set in motion by Asar and his wife Aset. It was always in all of the natural aspects of creation or God, if you will, were both male and female. And it's important to note too that God is a German word, and God does not denote gender. So
Right.
we have to expand our understanding of what this knowledge is, what this sacred science is, and realize that we've been socialized to see our reality through a European Afrophobic lens. So, in order to literally free our minds, we have to begin to immerse ourselves into those things that are African, and that's where we will find life. So Masonry is just one way of doing it. To be honest with you, man, fraternities and sororities are an extension of that same process.
That's what they were designed to do.
Yep.
It's about character building. But character building isn't just what we call ethic moral behavior. Character building is a developmental consciousness that has to do, every organ in your body has a vibration. Every cell in your body has a rhythmic pattern that determines healthiness or unhealthiness to whatever degree it is. Masonry is one of those institutions that try to restore what we call ma'at in Kemet, the harmony and the balance in the human character through behavior, through character development. And as you rise up through the ranks, people think of it as just the numbered degrees. No, those degrees signify what Tony was saying earlier. If you are available or qualified to obtain and sustain a certain amount of information, you understand? If you haven't shown through character growth that you can handle a body of knowledge, that body of knowledge will not be shared with you. And that character has to do with looking at individual development, family development, neighborhood development, community development, nation development, because the quality and attributes for all of this is the same, just expansive. You see? And so that's why you'll see many of our political leaders are Masons. They didn't become political leaders because they were Masons. They became political leaders because their character. Now, we got some with flawed characters gotten by, but we've got many that have served us well because those lodges have prepared them well. And you'll find, in one lecture I did years ago, where I found when people were denying, saying that Masonry developed in the UK, and then I found the tomb of a Roman soldier with the symbols and the working tools on there. So that's a long way from the UK by centuries. And so this is a craft of how to teach human beings to be better human beings and to become servant of the masses and not rulers of the masses. That's hard for people to understand. But it's about you need a ruler. The people of the ruler, the leaders of the servant of the rulers. That's why in ancient Kemet, right? I'll show you one concept. We all love astrology. Everybody know what's your sign. My sign is this. I mean, you pick your girlfriend by what's your sign. And we learned about what's your sign in an attempt by the scientists called astronomers to explain cosmology to the masses. They know they couldn't bring them the hard scientific work that we call astronomy because we didn't have time for that. I was herding cattle, you were herding sheep, somebody was planting wheat, somebody was building boats, somebody's getting mud for houses. So we didn't have time to be looking at no darn stars, but somebody needed to do it. So we made sure those people could eat and had a place to sleep and they were taken care of, but they had to bring that body of wisdom back to us in a way we could use it in our daily lives. So astrology is astronomy explained to the masses, if you can get that. To give you a sense when we think of masonry, how we use knowledge to attend to the economic, politics, culture, food, clothing, shelter of the daily world.
Okay. Both of you brothers mentioned leadership. The next question is, what is, if there is anything missing for the future for leaders? Is there something that we need to look back, Sankofa, look back in order to move forward? What are we, what, in other words, I'm hoping I'm being clear here. Is there anything that we're missing today that we can look back to Kemet and grab in order to be better leaders in the future? You're on mute, Brother Browder.
I'm muting myself now. In my latest book, A Broader Perspective, that's one of the first essays in the book where I address Afrophobia versus Afrophilia. We've been taught, we've been socialized from the time that we were born to hate Africa, to despise Africa, which is if you study the information, Africa is the source of humanity, the source of all of those things that constitutes culture and civilization. So one of the first things that we have to do is learn to fall in love with our African selves and read and study everything that we can about Africa that has been primarily written by a person of African ancestry. So, you know, the time frame that Brother James became a man, you know, the 50s and 60s is one of the most important times in human history because that's when the Black Power movement, the Black Consciousness movement, the Black Studies movement was all birthed during that time frame. And I see that as a resurgence of these African ancestors preparing to re-enter into our consciousnesses. So that is what is needed right now. And any so-called leader who is unwilling or incapable of embracing this African spirit is someone who's going to lead you straight to hell. And so you can't, a leader, a good leader can only lead the people who are ready to be led. And so those people in the ranks and file are the ones that are going to have to read and study and select the leaderships from the rank and file so that they can move in a concentrated effort towards a direction that's going to benefit them over the course of the next 3 to 7 generations. It's not about doing for self right now to the extent that one is selfish. It's about being selfless enough to do what is required in order to make things better for future generations. So when more people have that consciousness, then they can produce from their ranks a leadership that will amplify that consciousness and make it possible for us to begin to in a more easier manner, do the things that we've come here to do.
And I would only add a little to that, Tony. When we look at Kemet, because the question is, why does Kemet matters? And look at the longevity of the civilization. That longevity speaks to the foundational stability of the civilization. And in studying Kemet and looking at its stability, what gave it that stability? What allowed it to have that longevity? And you see, it was all about character building. It was all about quality and attributes of the human character. When we talk about the netters, the netteru being the divine, but the netters being the qualities and attributes of God that we felt we understood, that we wanted to imbue in our own character and in the character of the society we were building. And so the value of just that is extraordinary to understand. And it's not just confined to Kemet. And sadly, having been an imam and a haji, I taught a little bit different from others, and a lot didn't like my approach. But in Islam, they have a concept called the pearls of faith, the 99 names of Allah. It is 99 of the what we call the netters, 99 of them that you should learn and imbue at least as many of them as you can in your character. Same thing with the Yoruba. I'm a priest in the Yoruba tradition, but Orishas are not gods. They're qualities and attributes that you can find in nature that is already in your character dormant, that through practice and habits you can develop as behavioral tools. You see, in voodoo, they call the same thing a loas. Loas ain't a bunch of gods flying around in outer space. These are character possibilities that you can replicate in your behavior. And yeah, when we think of those things, then we think, and yes, my dear brothers and sisters who are Christians, I do not want to leave you lost, because Christianity was given birth out of your ancient belly, though what they've done with it has been misusing. But the 12 disciples of Christ was not men. They're quality and attributes of the character that makes one a Christ. I used to be a Christian minister too. We can get into that one if you really want to. But when you look at it, you can really have fun with history, have fun studying sacred science and culture, and then you really fall in love with your African self, because then you know you are the divine spirit having the human example of the human experiences.
Okay, the next question is, can you explain when you had your metamorphosis? When was the moment that you knew?
Oh, wow. For me, I didn't have to have one. My grandma was a root lady. I grew up on a plantation in the swamps of South Carolina. I grew up in Africa, in South Carolina. Because in those villages back in those woods, we didn't know any other world except the world they built when they stepped off those ships. I went to school in a one-room classroom from first grade to sixth grade, taught by the same teacher. And most of the time when the weather was good, I was barefooted, you know. And so when I went to town, I was in the seventh grade. It was like going into another world. But I also then went to a black school, taught by all black people that loved me. I wasn't abused by the other race, because as a child, until I left home at 18 to join the military, I was never in their hands, never in their hands. And my papa, who was a licensed Baptist preacher, was also a Prince Hall Mason and in the Moorish Science Temple. And Mama was a root lady. So I come out of that household. That's all I know. That's all I ever want to know. To expand on that they gave me, you know.
Well, I can say my metamorphosis began when I made my first trip to Egypt in December of 1980 with Dr. Ben. And as I was reflecting on that trip 46 years ago, my very first trip to Egypt was during the winter solstice. And my first 3 days in Egypt, as I look back on that experience now, were like an initiation. My first couple of hours in Egypt, myself and 3 other friends went down to Giza at night and walked around the pyramid. The next night, those same friends and I came back to Giza, and we climbed to the top of the pyramid and watched the sunrise on the last day of the winter solstice from the top of Khufu's pyramid. And then later that morning, we literally stood between the paws of the Sphinx, Hera Maket, Back in those days, they didn't have all the fences, so we could move about quite differently. And then on the third day, December the 25th, I went back to the pyramid and was able to spend 2 hours in the pyramid by myself. There was a power outage. There was no electricity inside of the pyramid, but I convinced the guard there to let me in because I had been in the day before and I had a flashlight. So I spent time in the pyramid by myself and had an opportunity to do a meditation in the king's chamber and had these visions, had these images. It wasn't until 33 years later that I realized that one of the visions that I had was me standing in the pillared hall of Karakamin's tomb. So I now have an understanding that my very first trip to Egypt was to lay out what was to be my destiny. I didn't know it at the time, but as long as I continued to listen to and to follow, heroes and sheroes like Brother James and Sister Kemet and others, then I stayed on a path that ultimately allowed me to fulfill what Dr. Wilson referred to as my cosmic assignment. Everybody comes here with something that they are born to do. And we have people around us to guide us and to keep us on the path. And to the extent to which we do that, then our works, our actions allow us to influence others and transform the world. That's what everyone is here to do. That is our ultimate mission, not to be sidetracked by other things that divert our attention. So that's the task that's before us. And again, I want to challenge everyone, all 230 people who are listening to this Zoom, that is the reason why we're here. Don't be distracted by other organizations, other institutions, other distractions that are just that, distractions. You are here to raise your level of consciousness, not to argue and debate with others, not to put other people down because they don't believe what you believe. You're here to better yourself. And once you better yourself, then you model for others what a conscious man or woman is supposed to do. That's how we liberate ourselves. And that's the quality of consciousness that is going to be required in order to save the world. And we save the world first by saving the United States of America. It's no accident that we're here in this country, the wealthiest nation in human history. And if we did, or when we do the things that we're supposed to do, we have the capacity to turn the world right side up. And everyone will benefit because of the things that we must do.
That's beautiful, Tony. I like that piece because a lot of people don't understand that our mission here in the West. These are nice bodies, and I have a good strong body, but this is just the house I'm working out of for now, for the time being. But we are here to see the world when it comes to its greatest potential and make sure that potential is not destructive, but it's constructive.
So,
And I think we've managed that relatively well under the circumstances, and we will do better, as time goes on.
one of the things here that you gentlemen have talked about is history, culture, sacred science. Brother Browder, could you please speak to the sacred science that is connected to Khufu's pyramid at Giza Plateau, and how the sacred science up above impacts those three mirrors, those three pyramids?
Sure, I'll do that, Brother Dion. But first thing I must do is to remind you that Brother James and myself are not gentlemen. Gentleman is an old English word that describes a white man who beats his wife gently with an open hand as opposed to a closed fist. So we are brothers, right?
Brothers.
We are brothers, all right? So with regards to the mirror, mirror is the original word for the structure, the architectural structure that the Greeks called pyramid. Mirror means a place of ascension. Mirror are not tombs. Mirror were built over tombs in order to facilitate the ascension of the souls buried underneath the earth, underneath the mirror, into heaven, where that soul is to be reborn. There is a specific region in heaven where souls are to be reborn. And if you look at the shaft that extends through the northern side of the king's chamber, that shaft points to the first star in the belt of the constellation that the Africans knew as Sahu. We know that constellation better by its Greek name, Orion. That was the place where in the ancient texts, going all the way back to the so-called pyramid texts, in underneath the pyramid of Unas in Saqqara, we know Kemetic as the place where all souls go to be reborn. The Africans were very specific about where souls went to be reborn. And so we have it's the shaft that points to the south, in the king's chamber, that points to the first star in the belt of Sahu. The shaft that points to the south from the queen's chamber points to the star system that they knew as Kemetic. We know that star system, this binary star system, better by its Greek name, Sirius. So those two shafts from the southern side of Khufu's mirror point to the symbol of Asar, which is Sahu, and the symbol of Aset, which is Kemetic. So Asar and Aset are mythological characters that represent celestial phenomena. And so what we have at the Giza Plateau are the three mir of Khufu, Khafra, and Menkaure, a father, a son, and a grandson, were replicas on Earth of the three stars in the belt of the constellation of Sahu. So the architectonics of the Giza Plateau is a representation of the concept as above, so below. What is in the heavens, what is in the cosmos, has been replicated in Kemet. That's one of the reasons why Kemet was viewed as heaven on earth, and everything outside of Kemet was Isfet, the domain of terror, disorganization, and confusion. So Africans, when they were in control of their sacred science, their knowledge of their relationship with the elements of creation, were capable of creating heaven on earth. So that's a skill that we also have access to. We have to filter it through the right lens, an African-centered lens. We have to be the instrument through which the ancestors will allow us to better analyze what we're filtering, so that we understand how this information can be used for productive purposes. And so those structures, those lessons, those texts are all available to us at this moment right now to help us do the things that we were born to do.
And brother Professor Smalls, there's a question here that's asking, can you discuss the Kemetic origins of healthcare?
Of healthcare?
I'm not. It may be something to Imhotep.
Okay, no, I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
So Brother James, that question came from Brother Kojo, Bertie Gallman, who's a physician. So he just wants you to elaborate on that concept.
Yeah, Bernie, I did get your manuscript yesterday, so I'll be getting to work on that next week. Well, when we look at all of the the first medical texts ever written, the Ebers Papyrus, there's a number of others that you could get, where we actually wrote down and codified our medical sciences. If we go just to the statement I opened with a couple of hours ago, Plato said the first science that the Ethiopians gave to the world was the science of medicine itself. What I didn't say, he said the greatest science of all that the Ethiopian gave to the world was the science of writing itself. And we need to think about that. But you can find multiple medical books. I forgot what tomb it is, so you can help me, where you'll see all of the medical tools, many of which we are still using today, chiseled on the wall of the tombs. You will also see images of the women giving birth using the birth chair, something that Western science is just discovering is better for the birthing process than lying flat on your back. So the science of ancient Kemet is still ahead of the world. Until the 17th centuries, all of the medical books in Europe were the medical books that the Moors took to Europe via Spain, that they got from the Umayyad Islamic uh, technocracies out of Kemet. Okay. So the Kemetic medical books is still being used in Western medicine today without them telling us what it is. You'd have to trace that history back through Spain, back through the Moors, back through the Umayyads, who were the ones who invaded Kemet under Omar's rule as a caliphate of Islam. And you begin to say, oh my God, if we had no idea. But yet, much of what we call medical science today, they have proof that we were doing brain surgery. They had proof, they've got written literature on abdominal medicine, on what is it called? Obstetrics. Segmed knew all of this stuff by heart. But all of the major medical sciences that we're doing today, we were already doing it and wrote it in books that's in the museums in Britain and France and Russia under the names of those who bought it or stole it, but they're on the medicine of ancient Kemet. They had the most advanced medical system in the world to date. Our new technical tools, our diagnostic tools may precede anything anybody else had, but our remedies for medical treatment still have to go back to the treatments that they were doing in Kemet, right down to the honey and other elements they were using for birth controls back then. So no, we were kicking butts and not taking names in medicine way back then. And that science is still being used by the world today. That's why it's so important for people to get hold of the literature. And one that, we talk about the holy book right there, the book of the dead, the so-called, but the book of the coming forth by day, is one of those books that you read that really is a must read. It's hard to read. It takes you some time to catch up with it. But if you take your time and read it, you will be struck by the quantum physics, by the geometry, by the arithmetic, by the medical science that's in this document. Forget about the sacred, spiritual stuff you're going to learn. But all of the science, because in Kemet, they weren't separate pieces. They were a part of a whole, right? The science were all united because they complemented one another. It's just like good sleeping habits is good for the heart's function. Bad sleeping habits gonna interrupt the heart's rhythm. We never think about how good sleeping habits and good heart rhythm works. But when something happens to your heart, and I had one of those some years, about 12 years ago, I learned. I've been having some bad habits again. I'm trying to get back to my good habits. But you learn that every part of the human body have a relationship with the other organs. I'll give you a good example, then I'll shut up. For 35 years, I struggled with the prostate thing, which all of our brothers need to get on top of, right? And I'd given up on treatment, wearing catheters. You didn't even know I was wearing it when you saw me up there speaking and sounding all tough. I had something strapped to my leg, right? So one day I meet this doctor, and he says, they've got a new treatment, Small, but only two other people have tried it. It's called ambulation catheterization or catheterization ambulation. And he said, you don't go to sleep, though. You're going to be 2 hours on the operating table. You got to be wide awake, can't give you any anesthesia. And all I'm thinking about is pain, right? But it wasn't that much pain. They went through my arm with 3 wires. One was a camera, and the other two was electrodes. And they're on a screen like my computer here. They had 3 or 4 of them and a whole bunch of people in this room. And 2 nurses patting my shoulder, saying, Miss Small, you all right? Are you hurting? And what they did, they catheterize the blood vessels going to the prostate to cut off its oxygen flow, to force it to reduce its own size if it wanted to live. So it knows if I stay like the big, I'm gonna die because I'm not getting enough oxygen. But I decrease to the degree that the amount of oxygen I'm getting will allow me to continue my function. And I was the third person that tried it on and it worked, right? But here's the thing I wanted to tell you. When they were zapping the blood vessels on the right side, they caught them off guard. Zip, 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 30 minutes, they're cool. It took an hour and 45 minutes to get the blood vessels on the left side, because the blood vessels on the right side, I conclude, told them they're coming for you. So the things kept moving. And I'm hearing the doctors, I'm laying on this table, and they're losing their mind, saying every time we try to get it, we think we got it, it moves. And it was moving because the other side says something foreign just attacked me. They're coming for you. Do you hear what I'm saying? And it took them almost 2 hours to do on my left side, but it took them less than 30 minutes to do on the right side because the right side informed the left side that I was just attacked. But they finally got it done. And thank God 4 years later, I'm still doing fine. But the fact is, these things inside of us that we call liver and lung and pancreas, they all in communication with one another. They're a part of a system that's interconnected, and we are not aware of it. And the degree to which we become cognitive of that is the degree to which we can do better for our health and the knowledge we need to have of our internal organs to do better for our health.
Absolutely.
Trying to
Before our next
oh,
question, real quick, two things. One, I believe in blessing our elders. So if you don't mind, Brother Browder, Professor Small, can you put your Cash App in the group? For those of you who want to give, please bless them. I'm asking that humbly. It's not a requirement. We are not doing that. This isn't a forced thing. This is something to show that we appreciate these brothers' time. Secondly, before the next question, if you could, Brother Browder, as well as Professor Small, can you please let us know what initiatives you have currently, what trips you have, and where they can log on to follow you, follow more of your work, and what books they should pick up?
For me, you can go to professorsmallafricanworld.com or professorjamessmall.com for the webpage. I'm right now in the midst of still taking seats for my trip to Ghana and from the 23rd of July to the 7th of August. It's a 13-day on-the-ground trip. We're going to cover 7 cultural regions in Ghana, from the shores to the extreme north, from the east to the west. It's going to be fun. Some of it will be flying in country. Some of it we will do by road and bus. But it's a sacred trip. It's a sacred pilgrimage. It's also a fun trip. We will go to the slave dungeons. We will go to canopy walks. We will do naming ceremonies. And we will hang out at the nightclub and dance to jazz music and drink some palm wine. And we will walk in the mountains and go to the farms and the cattle farms in the north with our Muslim brothers and sisters. So if you want to come and have a fun time in Ghana, an education time in Ghana, a sacred spiritual time in Ghana, you can go to professorsmallafricanworld.com and my Facebook page. And my number is always online, 914-960-2693. 914-960-2693. And we just have a good time. I mean, you enjoy the trip. You get lectures. I don't lecture in the hall after the trip, after your hard day. Go take your shower, relax, enjoy your evening. But on the bus, you get a lecture every day, all day. And we have fun. We lecture, we sing, we do dances in the aisles, we learn Ghana instrument and some other language. So join us.
So I would encourage everyone who wants to have an authentic West African experience to go with Brother James. I've had the pleasure of traveling with him a couple of times, and there's no better person to travel with. So certainly do take him up on his invitation. Details on my study tours to Egypt are on our website. The link is in the chat. And I'm doing 3 study tours to Egypt this year. These will be my last study tours, and then I'm turning the page on Egypt. I've got a study tour planned for June. 15-day tour for July, and then my final tour will be in December of this year, and then I'm moving on to other things. Information about books and other activities, again, is on the IKG website, which is in the chat, and I encourage you all to check us out. We also will be having our Egypt on the Potomac field trips of DC. They're going to be starting late because of repairs at Meridian Hill Park, which is the jumping out point for the field trip. Those details are on the website. Because the park won't officially be open until October of this year. So we're only doing 2 field trips this year, October and November. I'm doing a couple of seminars, one in May and one in June, that commemorates the 40th anniversary of Egypt on the Potomac, where I'll be giving an overview of the field trip. I'll be sharing new information or new interpretations of old information, as well as some other aspects about the field trip that we don't have an opportunity to see because of time constraints. So again, all of those details are on the IKG website, and I encourage everyone to check us out. And I know we can't answer all of your questions, and there's some good questions in the chat, but I encourage you all to check out Brother James's lectures on YouTube, and his events. If he's going to be traveling and doing a speaking engagement in your town, I'm going to be heading to the West Coast next weekend. I'll be in Texas at the end of this month. So all of the details for my speaking engagements are on the website. And I want you all to consider this, because I've got to jump off at 4 o'clock because I've got a book event to do in 2 hours. But be aware of this, that given where this country is going right now, books are being banned, information is being banned, and having a Zoom meeting such as this might be illegal a year from now. That's a possibility. And so treasure your time, use your time judiciously. We do not have a moment to waste. Know yourself, study yourself, because that information is going to be crucial to your capacity to thrive as a human being in the coming years. So again, I want to throw it back to you, Jason. As I said, I got a split at 4 o'clock, but thank you for this opportunity. And Brother James, it's always good to chop it up with you, man.
Same here, Brother Tony.
Love you.
My pleasure always.
Peace, brother.
Yes, sir.
Give me 1 second. So if you have time, Professor Small, to stage a few questions. Brother Ashman, do you have any other questions on cue?
Yeah, I do. But before Brother Browder takes off, I want folks to know, listen, Finding Karaka Men, Survival Strategies for African Americans, The Browder Files, Egypt on the Potomac, and Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization. And I will be picking up the most recent book very soon. Thank you, Brother Browder, for everything. Thank you for it all. Traveling to Kemet with you, all the experiences there, going up in the King's Chamber, the ritual chamber. At my height, 6'5", is crazy. It's not built for that, but it's just not built for that. But we made it happen, and then getting down on all fours to crawl in that little tunnel to get into the ritual chamber. It's for those who have not experienced it, you save. Connect with Atlantis, you connect with Professor Smalls. And I mean, just amazing the way the impact that those trips had on myself and my son, for that matter, was just incredible. It was incredible and so moving. And it shows us exactly what our ancestors did, not during enslavement, but 2,000, 4,000 years before our enslavement. It's just incredible. So I thank you for that. Professor Smalls, Brother Professor Smalls, there is another question here that a gentleman had, and he's asking.
All right, now I'm getting ready to leave, but you just said gentleman again. Dion, I'm calling you on it. brother.
My brother.
And I'm out of here. Thank you all so much.
Yes. The brother had this question: is there a connection between Kemet and the Dogon people? and their philosophies?
Oh yeah, that's a big question. Kemet is a place, not a race. Africa's our race. The people who built Kemet came from south, north, east, south, and west. And when Kemet was invaded, in the multiple invasions, starting with the Hyksos, right, to the Hittites, to the Assyrians, to the Persians, to the Greeks, to the Romans, in each of those invasions, we leave. The most of the people that can leave when, especially in the northern part of Kemet, and they would return mostly to West and Southern Africa. And so the people who are the Dogon, they talk about their genesis from Kemet. That's a part of their dialogue. The people who are Yoruba, they talk about their genesis from Kemet and Canaan, what we now call Palestine, Egypt, that whole area, which was Kemet back then. Then we talk about the people who are in Togo, the Ewe, they talk about Kemet as their genesis. And they got the proof to show you. They've got the religious ceremonies, they got the mathematics sciences, they got the astronomical sciences, which they practice as a part of daily culture. So there is no doubt that Africa was never the broken bunch of pieces the West is, oh, you got all these different languages, all these different cultures. Africa has primarily three languages. The rest are dialects off of those three. Okay. Um, and as far as genetic clusters, um, all of us about 99.910% the same genetic clusters. You know, we confuse aesthetic variations and cultural patterns with racial identity. No, those don't determine race. Those are the things that each ethnic group do depending on the ecology and environment they find themselves in at any given time with the body of information they have to share and how they will create the tools to share that information. And we call that process culture because culture is the primary educational system of a people. But what they're trying to share is universal. There's nothing that was used in Kemet that isn't necessary to be used by the Dogon if they're to thrive here on Earth. There's nothing used by the people who are the Dogon people, the Kemetic people, the Yoruba people, the Akan people, the Zulu people. They're all using the same sacred science. The laws of nature is not going to change for anybody. We're all looking at the same sun. We're all viewing the same moon at different times of the year. And we're all having the same experiences, but we are interpreting them with different tools, all right, using different aesthetics and different ecological environments so it makes sense to us where we're at. But we're all talking about the same scientific culture. I hope that answers that question.
Brother Jason.
I'm checking the chat. Just want to see if there's any other questions. It says, please address the comment about the belief Christianity started in Africa and help clarify the roots of the Bible story.
Yeah, that's not a belief. That is a historical, scientific understanding, even by the Catholic Church. The Pope, three popes back, in his visit to Cameroon, stated, and it's a part of the record, it was in Life magazine in Europe, that of the 10 bishops that wrote what became the Nicene Creed or did the initiation of creating the Bible at Nicaea in Rome, 8 of them were Africans. The Pope said this. So blame him. If we look at what the head of Russia released from the earliest churches that existed before the Roman Catholic Church by 500 years, all of their symbols of Christ and the royal family and the disciples are all African, there to see in Moscow. You can bring it up online. If you go to the not Ethiopian, the Egyptian Coptic Church, all of the images of Christ, Mary, Mary's mother, the disciples, they're all Africans. The Catholic Church is 500 years younger than the Ethiopian Church. Let me get that straight so you get it. The Catholic Church is 500 years younger than the Ethiopian Church. The Protestant Church, which begins with the Reformation of Martin Luther and his rebellion against the Catholic Church, is 1,000 years younger than the Ethiopian Church, and even younger than the Egyptian Coptic Church. Now, the Ethiopian Church is not the genesis of Christianity as we know it. The genesis of Christianity is in what we call the Coptic Church. And those that we call the Eastern Orthodox Church was a part of the old Byzantine Empire. That was the Eastern Roman Empire. That's where the church grew. And all historian will let you know, or you can do your basic studying and research, that the ethnicity of those people in what is now called Turkey was all African. The next church you will see rise up in Christianity is the fledgling Coptic Church of Egypt and the massive Ethiopian Church of Ethiopia and Sudan. Sudan may have had more cathedrals than Ethiopia, but the Muslim conquest of Sudan destroyed most of them, though many of them are being excavated today and being raised back to historical prominence. So history will tell you where the church started and where the church flourished for hundreds and hundreds of years before Rome even figured out what was going on. And so, with that said, if you look at the literature of the church and just play with it, Last Supper, everybody loved that picture. When I tried to move Mama's Last Supper when I became a Muslim and went back home, I thought that old lady was going to take my hand. She said, "You leave Jesus right up there on that wall." She said, "You could put your star over there and your moon, but don't you mess with Jesus." And I didn't mess with Mama's Jesus. But she let me put up the star and crescent. Um, and she was a good old lady. But when Jesus is sitting at that table for the Passover feast, which we call the Last Supper, he's sitting with 12 people. If you look at the photograph, the original one by Da Vinci, you will see that each of the 12 people are in four groups of threes. So what you're looking at is the 12 signs of the zodiac, the four seasons. It is and Christ sitting there with light emanating from his head like the sun. And then the other people represents, the 12 months of the year. You're looking at an anthropomorphic representation of a cosmic drama that happens every day in the universe. So you go look at it and think I'm crazy. Think I'm making tell me how crazy I'm not. Because Europe at that point in history was fundamentally illiterate. And the way you taught was through painting. That painting is their hieroglyph to tell a story about cosmology and ecology and how it affects our lives. That's just one of the instruments and tools. But the thing, if you study the literature itself, the Bible, the ethical moral stories that it tells to try to make certain ethical moral points, all of that is covered in books that's already written. And you can get the book called the Hosea, translated by Dr. Maulana Karanga. He translates excerpts from multiple ancient Egyptian books, and you will find almost everything in there that you will end up finding in the Bible, including from his very earliest chapter, the proclamation of one God. So it isn't a competition between Christianity and its genesis. It is us knowing how others took your concepts and ideas and tried to save themselves. Now, maybe they didn't do the best job of it, and they didn't. And maybe because they didn't understand fully the foundation of it, and they've proven that. But that is the genesis. And history will show you that genesis. You know.
Okay, I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question. It's kind of a long one. The question is Oh, okay. There is so much new talk about the evidence of the transatlantic slave trade narrative being over exaggerated or that it did not happen at all. Can you, can you speak to this, or and where does it leave those of us who are melanated here in America, as well as our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean, people connected to Kemet? How do you make the correlation between people in Kemet and people here who may or may not have been affected by the transatlantic slave trade?
There's nobody here that haven't been affected by the transatlantic slave trade. You can't make myth reality. Let's get that straight first, coming right up out of my mouth. Um, Even if you didn't come on the slave ship, you were affected by the slave trade because the people who brought the ship conquered this entire hemisphere and is still in control of that conquest process. They were Africans in North America, Central America, South America, um, for tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years before Columbus. But that's relative to what? We were in Vietnam, Cambodia, China, Australia, India, and all of those places. So why are we so enamored to find something to separate us from Africa? There's something wrong with that line of thinking. If you go to India, there's a group of people who've been there for more than 60,000 years. They still celebrate their African roots. 60,000 years. Okay? Yes, some of us was here. You can look at my face and some of your face and see our readiness that we're a product of mixing with the Asiatics who we call Indian. The black and the yellow produces red. Okay? So but we also a product of mixing with the Africans who came over on the ship. There's a young brother, and his book is over there somewhere. He passed away 2 years ago. He was from the Nation of Islam, and he wrote this fantastic book on blacks in Mexico. Lamont, Brother Lamont. And when he first went to Mexico, Lamont came back to my house in Harlem. And he said, "But Small, I met these elders and they told me the story about those who came before the boat and those who came on the boats." Well, those who came before the boats were those Africans who were here for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. They don't even know their own Genesis. And then those who came on the boat. But he said how they mixed and became one. And he was in southern Mexico. And he said the sheriff is black, the mayor was black, everybody in the towns are black, because that's where the bulk of them still resides. And so the same thing in North America. When I was a child, I would go and with my papa, and we would clean the mounds. You know, the mounds are burial ground for our Native American ancestors. You're buried above ground. But we didn't make a big deal about it. They were our family. My family, we do some of our, we've had two in my lifetime, family reunion on the reservations in North Carolina. But we didn't deny our African roots because we were on the reservation up there with the Cherokees and the Chicora and the Tuscaroras and the others who have all meshed. There's no more Cherokee Nation. They call it all Cherokee Nation, but that's the Tuscarora, that's the Waccamo, that's the Chicora. The white man put them all on the same reservation and they became one. Just like he put all of us on the same plantation and we became one. So I'd like somebody to show me the distinct group that was here that didn't mix with the ones that come off the boat. Ain't gonna find it. Because love conquers everything. And when that black man and that black woman see each other, it doesn't matter what shade of black you are, beige, brown, tan, you're gonna amalgamate. And we did. We were one. Their science will show the only genesis genetically of a human being on the planet Earth takes place in Africa. So it doesn't matter when you got here, 20,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, or 5 years ago, you're still African. So what is the dialogue? Unless there's something political I don't get. And I know I get it, but I'm not going to even address it. I think I answered that question, and I think it has foundation. I think I understand some of the fears. I understand some of the anger. I understand a lot of the things that go on. My brother says, well, somebody attacked me online yesterday. It was a brother. Some white man is posting a picture of me in this black shirt, and then he has across my chest some racist, not even a racist thing where I said, If you give black, I don't think I said it, but he put it up there. I traced it back and found out who did it. And I guess he thought that was an attack on me. And sure enough, some white people started attacking me online. And then one black person came up with a heavy attack and said, well, Africans sold Africans. Well, my cousin was selling dope down the street there. All right. You know how many black kids he murdered? And I know so many of others of us who live here who have sold drugs, robbed our people, murdered our people, shoot down our children in the street. Matter of fact, and are we going to disconnect from all of our people here because somebody did some criminal behavior? No. We're going to try to isolate and wipe out the criminal behaving. And if you want to go back to history and find out who was engaged in the slave trade voluntarily, then do that research. Don't tell me Africans sold Africans, because the ones who was being sold was Africans. And the ones who was left on the ground in Africa dead was Africans. And the one who was left in the village that was burnt to the ground was Africans. And the one who had to run and hide in the woods, that was Africans. And so which one are you talking about?
Right.
All right. So
Right.
do the research and find out there were some chiefs. And many African chiefs, contrary to many of us, have come to this country and publicly apologized. I know from at least 3 regions. And they were on TV. And they went around the country with stool and skin, apologizing for whatever role they stool have had. You may say that ain't enough. You never heard of them. I can tell you about Nanambra. I can tell you about the airway chiefs that came with the Frankra and others. But it is our job to mend the broken pieces of our family, not to execute the family because it has broken pieces. And so that's my response. We were everywhere in the world before anybody else went anywhere in the world. And that's the history of anthropology, archaeology, and paleontology. Study it, and it'll all bring you back to Africa.
Yeah, because the second part of the question was actually, was Kemet a global civilization prior to, I guess being discovered? Someone put that in the chat, and then also the other question, besides Kemet, were there other countries such as the Mali Empire that had already been here on the soil prior to?
Oh, yeah, well, we know that the Mansa Musa's younger brother, I forgot the brother's name, brought 1,000 ships this way, and only I think 3 returned. So that meant 9,900 and something brothers and sisters. I didn't think they all drowned. And we find roots of them all over Central and South America because that seemed to be where they landed. So we knew, but when the Malians came here, they found Africans was already here.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? We were already throughout those islands. We were here before the expedition from Mali came. But when Christopher Columbus came, the wind and the water current that brought him here, his pilot was a young black man from Elmina, Ghana. Christopher Columbus and his father-in-law worked on building the Elmina slave dungeon in Africa in the 1480s. And they took these Africans back with them to Portugal. And one of those young men, using the knowledge of his ancestors and elders, guide Columbus' ship to the currents that bring them here. About 4 years ago, some Europeans, and they've done this a number of times, got in big rowboats and just let the current drop them in the Bahamas and in Puerto Rico within a 2 weeks period. Now, if it does it to some rowboats, I know Mansa Musa's people made it here in all those ships, okay? And we saw Columbus and them making, and we know that the person who guided him here was a young black man. So we understand that history will erase a lot of these questions we have and a lot of the fears. You think my heart don't hurt that some of my own people may have sold me into slavery? But they were the minority. I know the history of the ones that fought the wars against slavery. I know Nzenga, 50-year fighting. I know Amanatu. I know Bonsu. They may have cut off his head and put it in a jar and took it to Portugal, to Holland for all these years. But he defeated them and ran them out of Elmina before they finally captured him. I know so many other great warriors and chiefs that fought to stop this thing. So don't just tell me about the few that you heard of and don't know anything about who was involved in this thing. Let's study history and erase the mystery. and let's condemn those thrones that was involved, whether it's Benin or Ghana, wherever, and let's praise those thrones that fought to the death, Yasantua, and so many others. You know, Tippy too was an enslaver, but Muhammad Ahmed fought against it and took out 20,000 British and Turkish troops in defense of us. So let's talk about him. Let's talk about our brother Secheweya, that in one day took down 2,000 British troops in South Africa, fighting against them, trying to capture our people, and took them down with nothing but spears and swords against recoilless rifles. Let's talk about Bambata, though he ended up getting killed and lost 2,000 men in one day to the Gatling guns, the thousands of British he took down. So there's so many, and there's so many sisters and brothers who fought against this terrible thing that didn't start with the Christian white man in the West, but it started with the Arabs and the Turks in the East and North Africa 1,500 years before. Let's talk about one of the greatest rebellions in the history of slavery before Haiti, and is the rebellion of the Zanj that takes place in Kuwait, okay, in the 8th century. And yes, we said the Arabs are racist, but many of the brothers who fought beside them and helped them resist for almost 4 years were also Arabs. So let's study history and get it right. So we're not just making generalizations and trying to arouse people's emotions and attend to people's fears. Even if my father was a drunk, and thank God that he wasn't, I'm still going to love him. All right? Because I would try to understand what made him become an alcoholic in the first place. I'm not going to behave as he did. I'm going to condemn his behavior and try to put in place the kind of training that will not allow for us to reduce ourselves to that kind of slavery, because alcoholism is slavery. You know, I smoked cigarette, that was slavery. And God, when I was free from that slavery, oh, you have no idea what it feels like. But no, let's study history. That's what this process is about. We're going to see some bad things in there we don't like, but we're going to see a lot of beautiful things we're going to love.
So that being said, if anybody on the line here was just getting started, where would you recommend they begin?
The first thing I would study, I would say study your family tree. Learn about your mom, your dad, your grandparents. Study the part of this country where they were born in. If you have Native American, I'll use that in a generic way, Native American roots. Learn who they are. Like my people were the Chicora Nation and the Tuscarora, as well as the Africans from Sierra Leone and from Angola. And they merged to produce me. So study these people and study their history. Then study the area, whether it's South Carolina, Mississippi, Arkansas, New Orleans. Study that history. What did those black people do? What fight were they up against? What kind of terrorism did they have to defend themselves against? And what beautiful societies did they build for themselves? And then LeRon Bennett, this one, LeRon Bennett, he's got one called The Shaping of Black America by Dr. LeRon Bennett. That is an extraordinary, extraordinary, extraordinary book. Read that book, The Shaping of Black America. It's just important that we begin to learn. And then before the Mayflower, if we got those two books in our heads, then we can jump over to Africa. And even before we get over to the Book of the Dead and the Pyramid Texts over to Kemet, let's study the Mali Empire, the Songhai Empire. Let's study Queen Nzinga and the Congo-Angola Empire. Let's study the Zulu Empire. Then let's go up into Kemet. And when you get to studying, you see, we had a few people who did some bad things, but we had some badass brothers and sisters. You hear me? And when we bring their spirits back to life, some of this pain in your hearts will go away. Some of the betrayal you feel will go away. You can say, well, that one betrayed me, but that 100 over there, they defended me. So my love for them can't be waned, And so that's why I say history will erase the mystery. There's pain in history and there's joy in history. Like I was the minister of the Muslim Mosque Inc. The Muslim Mosque Inc. was started by Malcolm X after he left the Nation of Islam. But I still love Minister Farrakhan. I still love the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. I did my best to bring peace between those communities, quietly and behind the scenes, and the way I lived my life. Somebody's even been attacking me online because I said the Nation of Islam didn't kill Malcolm X. The Nation of Islam is made up of hundreds of thousands of people. They had nothing to do with what happened to Malcolm. The few people that had something to do with what happened to Malcolm, if you think you know they are, go track them down. But you're going to get angry with me because I won't condemn my brothers and sisters. Some of the closest comrades I've got is in the Nation of Islam. And they know that I'm Malcolm X's man. I'm literally, anybody can tell you that. And I don't run from nothing. I know some people have been out there trying to spook me. Somebody even called and threatened my life a couple of weeks ago. I'll show up in your town and I will announce when I'm coming. You have no understanding what you're messing with.
Mm.
I've been here. I will be here until the ancestor says I'm here no more. And until they make that call, you don't even have a card in the game. You know?
So
So,
it comes to mind now, Brother Small.
hmm.
There's always this notion that Dr. King and Malcolm X were at odds. Can you add some clarity to that? What was the relationship between them, if there was any? Because to my understanding, they only met twice.
Those men had the greatest respect for one another. And I think the person who pulled the cover off of it all the other day, Andrew Young, just finished his autobiography. And he talks about this in the biography on how close they were and how they had decided that they were going to be yin and yang in the public, that they decided this between the two of them. No one was closer to Dr. King than Dr. Young. And Dr. Young has said that Malcolm and King, we know that Dr. King and the Honorable Elijah Muhammad shared the same attorney. Now that should tell you something right there. Okay. And so, and we know that they had had multiple meetings. But Andy said that Malcolm and Dr. King had deliberately, in their own private meeting, says, you take this stance, I will take this stance, and we will milk it. They knew what they were doing. Malcolm did said this overtly when he went down to Selma when Doc was in jail, and he gave him a choice. Either let Doc out of jail, you got to deal with me. They let Doc out of jail so Malcolm get the heck up out of town. All right. So we just need to study history and put the pieces together for ourselves. I think when we do that, we'll have a better understanding of what our people's relationship was that goes beyond the white headlines. Because most of the news we hear about our leaders and most of the information we got about our leaders were coming from the white press, right or left, then none was our friend and still aren't. You know?
Outstanding. Um, so, Professor Small, thank you, brother. We appreciate your time. Respect to the elders. We appreciate everything. I don't see any other questions in the chat, and we appreciate you for staying because we were timed to be here until 4. It was now 4:30. I want to respect your time.
No, I appreciate it.
Is there anything else that you would like to share before you go?
Yeah, our people fight for unity. Nothing divided ever wins victories. Only united will you defeat the enemies that we have. And you don't have to agree on all principles with one another. Agree that you will unify around things economic, political, and cultural for the sake of the generations to come. There's no scientific anything you can show me where fostering division among a people ever brings victory for that people. Making yourself and maintain yourself a minority in the house of another racial group of terrorists who are the majority will not bring you victory. So let's find ways to unite. We're going to have differences throughout generations. Let's learn to respect the differences and try to work through them. But let's learn to unite so that we have a front that is strong around things economic, things political, things cultural. And to my brothers, please get more involved in the education of our children. Please get more involved in the PTAs that attend to your children's schools. Please get more involved in the school board so you can be on top of these policies being made as regarding the life of our children. Yes, our sisters are very involved. But let me tell you something. This is a patriarchal social ecology, and they fear the black man. You get up in there, they got a problem. So let's go be daddy. Let's be husband. Let's be uncle. Let's be father. Let's be brothers. And let's go stand in these institutions that determining the future of our children and play a role more strongly than what we've been playing. You know? And we'll have victory. We're going to have victory, but we can speed up the process. You know what I'm saying?
All
You
right.
young brothers, the world is literally, guys like me, we're walking out the door, you know. Last night I attended the funeral of Dr. Bob Law, who was 86, who was a master in communications. He had the first national talk show in this country called in, taught so many people so many things, a member of CORE, a member of SNCC, just a beautiful community man. And I'm 80. You know what I'm saying? I'm seeing that little door crack open and say, yo, come here, bro. It's time for you to go. So this is y'all's ball game. Don't spend it fighting each other. Don't spend it disrespecting each other. Find ways to get over the differences. Make love a reality, not just a word, you know. Make respect a reality. Make building good character a goal from the time you are able to reason. Study history and remove the white man's mystery out of your consciousness. Those are the things that I love to see my brothers and sisters do, so we can build the kingdom of God on earth for ourselves to enjoy our lives with our grandchildren and great children. Do that. Asa Hilliard said, being shackled to your identity is true freedom. Being shackled to your identity is true freedom. And your identity starts with your ancestors. Remember this about them. They live in you. And hear how I say it now. Your ancestors, they live in you as you. Think about that concept. Your ancestors are your genetics, right? They're your DNA. They live in you as you. They're not dead somewhere. You are them going forward. Nurture them. History helps you do that, to bring them alive in you as you. Then you got power.
Ashe.
All right, brothers and sisters, peace and blessings. I'm going downstairs and have a cup of tea with my wife. I ain't seen her all day. She said good morning this morning.
All right, everyone. We're going to leave the chat open just for a minute or two. If you do see the Cash App and you want to bless these two brothers, please do. And then also take the time out to take out on the website and some of their initiatives. We thank you for logging